Hello again, everybody. I'm Chris.
And I'm Sue.
Today we're going to talk about how Sue got her portion of her debt.
Yeah, about $106,000.
Got indigestion now. It's so much money.
So we have so much debt that we had to write it down over several pages. So if you see us looking down, that's why. It's very detailed. Starting off with student loans, I borrowed $88,053. I am not sure why it's 53. That's a very strange amount. And that's over 14 different loans ranging from $2,000 to $13,000. So the reason that I have these student loans, I actually went to a 2-year community college to start off with, which didn't actually cost me anything. I was poor enough to get financial aid. But then I wanted to go to a 4-year school, and it was actually the 4-year school I didn't make it into when I applied the first time, and it is pretty pricey. And so even though I was only there 2 years, I also didn't have a car, and I didn't have a way to get back and forth to the school. It was so far away, so I ended up living in the dorms, which was very expensive on top of the really costly tuition. So if I had gone all 4 years, we'd be talking a much, much larger number. But 2 years alone was $88,000, which is painful because I didn't add that number up until today for the very first time, if you can believe that. Different video coming on why I didn't know what I borrowed. All right, so the next topic on the list is credit card debt. So I actually think I did pretty good. I didn't get a credit card until I was at least 27 years old, which is not really the norm. And I actually always paid my balance off on time. Like I would get little things here and there, but I would always pay it off. And I didn't even put anything big on it. It might be little things like going to Tim Hortons or whatever, which I know, depending on your feelings on credit cards, that sounds terrible. But it would only be like $50 to $100 on it, and then I'd pay it off later because I was getting like airline miles and stuff like that. So I thought, cool, this is going great. And even when I moved into this apartment, all of the furniture that is mine in this apartment was completely paid for in cash. So that didn't even go on the credit card. So we were still just flying easy with that. And then depression spending kind of snuck in, where there were a few too many trips to the mall, especially for how close I lived to the mall. And I also ended up with a boyfriend, not him, that he made significantly more money than me. So he would treat for a lot of meals, a lot of outings and things, and would off the cuff just say, oh yeah, you can catch it next time. And whether or not he really meant it didn't matter. I felt really obligated to pay the next time we went out. And so I would offer, and sometimes he'd cover it, but sometimes he wouldn't. So it might be a $60, $80 outing 2 or 3 times a week sometimes, and I just kept swiping my card, and then the interest would catch up and things like that. So I had a $10,000 spending limit on my credit card, and I didn't come anywhere close to that for a long, long time. And then by the time I broke up with that guy and we got together, I had hit $9,500 on my credit card. I had almost maxed out my credit card, and I just didn't even know what to do at that point. So that was really painful. Something that we did to try to make it a little easier to pay off my credit card, and we have paid off quite a bit so far, is that I opened another credit card, nobody panic, and I transferred the balance so that I have 0 interest for, I believe it's 2 years. So that's helpful to not be racking up all the interest while trying to pay it off. So I finally eventually got fed up with not having a car. And that's not to say I didn't ever have a car. I had a string of really bad junkers over a long period of time because New York State not only eats cars with the salt, but I just kept buying really cheap, terrible cars because that's all I could afford. The problem with that is I don't know how to fix anything, and that costs more money, and I'll make another video on that because that's its own separate topic. But I finally just could not deal with it. One of my cars died, and I just screaming and shouting drove myself in someone else's car to the dealership to go buy a car. And I didn't negotiate on the price or anything. I was like, I just needed it to work. I just needed to be good. I needed it to work. I needed it to last me a few years. I went to one other dealership for another price on a very, very similar car. Drove back to the first one, was like, this is it. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I got my car that I actually currently still have. So it wasn't the worst investment ever.
No, you did pretty good on that.
I was also living at home, so I had the advantage that my mom encouraged me to save a lot of money besides paying down my debt. So I was able to put down $7,500 cash for my car, plus all the fees and stuff like that I was able to pay for in cash as well. But I still couldn't fully cover the cost of the vehicle, so I ended up having to take out a loan for $9,337 to pay for my car. So I'm gonna start out and just say what I think I did wrong, because this has been 12 years in the making. One of my big problems, and I still run into this now, is that I get FOMO, fear of missing out. So when someone goes on vacation or someone else gets a cool new toy or whatever it is, I'm like, oh man, I want either the same thing or something similar, or I should treat myself. And there's nothing wrong with treating yourself, but maybe not like $20,000 treat yourself. So that is definitely one big issue that I had, is just a lot of even depression spending related to that too, where I just couldn't be satisfied with what I had. So another problem that I have is that I just sort of gave up. Like, I was paying so much every month for so many things that I really wasn't even enjoying, that it kind of reached the point where I was like, why bother? I don't have any real money for myself. I'll just put it on credit cards or whatever it is. And the other thing, like I already mentioned, is that I didn't fully understand my student loans. And like I said, this will be a topic for another day, but kind of the brief summary of it is just that I kind of thought they wouldn't be as big payments as they were. I did not fully grasp exactly what I had borrowed because it was so many small amounts. And so when the bills for that started coming after I graduated, and especially during the recession, that was extremely difficult to deal with.
So really, in the grand scheme of things, even though we started with a lot of debt from you and also from me, you've done a lot of stuff right so far. Because you've always paid everything on time, and because you waited so long to get your first credit card, you were a lot more responsible with it than I was. So your credit as a result is very good. We don't have any real negative marks on the credit because of that, or because of student loans or anything like that.
So I think some other things that worked out pretty good for me were the fact that I lived with my parents till I was 28 and didn't have an apartment or anything like that. I didn't owe rent to them, so that really helped. My mom really wanted me to save money and pay down my debt. Another thing was that I also paid off my car earlier than I had to, and that was great. That saved a ton of money on that alone. Also, even though there's a little bit of shame for people with going to a community college and a 2-year school before transferring, that saved a gargantuan amount of money, and I actually don't regret it. Even though at the time it didn't feel great, it made me feel like a failure, it actually was incredibly beneficial. And even though I had a lot of student loans once I graduated my 4-year school, I have paid off like 3/4 of them so far, and we're making really good progress on what's left.
If you happen to be thinking about going to college and you haven't done it yet, that is definitely something to consider. There's no shame in it at all. It won't matter when you go get a job interview that you did your first couple of prerequisite courses at a community college.
Yeah.
They won't care.
Yeah, it makes no difference, honestly. And then I think the biggest thing that made a difference is I felt really lost, and then finally you got on this debt payoff train, and I was like, okay, cool, like whatever. But once we finally talked about it and had a plan, that really made a life-changing difference. Like, we would have never dug out of this hole if we kept going the way we were going, even if we didn't accumulate any more debt.
And even if we were making a lot more money.
Yeah, this was the only way to do it, was to just really plan how we were going to solve this problem, and that's where we're headed. We're solving this problem now. So that's the long and short of how I got into debt. Not a fun and exciting story, but we're gonna keep working toward getting both of us out of debt now that this is a joint venture. So we'll see you guys in the next video.